Hello, everyone. My name is Rochelle Innocent, and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling parents and children to connect from all around the world. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions and to create space on all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan: support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, we also write thought pieces every other Sunday. We actually just dropped a thought piece this past Sunday, so be sure to meander over to the website and check out our online content. Now, if it is the case that you are looking for a listening alternative, well, we're available wherever podcasts are playing, and we've provided you with access to a few links down below. Now, as is the convention, be sure to subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you are aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like these conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this segment. Let's get into it. Allô les mecs et les mecs. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is mental wellness. And on the topic of mental wellness, I want to talk about disappointment and how disappointment plays into our sense of overall wellness. And I want to talk about some of the strategies that I use, because disappointment is one of those emotions or states of being. I think disappointment's more of a state of being that hits me hard. It hits me like a ton of bricks. And I have had to learn through time and experience how to both manage and monitor my behavior when it is the case that I'm going through the throes of disappointment. And hopefully my strategies and my techniques are helpful to you. So while for the most part, I can create a lot of distance between myself and my emotions, I can intellectualize my emotions from a distance. When it is the case that I experience disappointment, this is one of those few experiences where the emotional avalanche that comes as a result of disappointment is not something I can deter. It's not something I can circumvent. I can't put it to the side and wait until later. Disappointment hits me really, really hard. And so disappointment is one of those things that I've had to learn to manage my behavior through disappointment so that I'm not engaging in any self-sabotaging behavior or self-destructive behavior or behavior that is self-gratifying that helps me feel better, but by doing things that are just not in alignment to my highest self. Because with disappointment comes a lot of frustration, it comes a lot of anger for me, with a lot of sadness. It's a cocktail of a lot of emotions that I preferably would like to avoid at all costs, but that I cannot. So when it is the case that disappointment comes, I experience all of these emotions, and then I have to work through these emotions to still be productive and to still, push forward. And so because disappointment is a heavy hitting one for me, it is where I am very much super conscientious of how I'm managing my emotions, where I am the most cognizant of the power of my emotions because of the way that they want to steer my behavior in certain ways that I typically would rather not engage in. And so when I'm experiencing disappointment, the one thing that I cannot circumvent is tears. I have to cry when I'm experiencing disappointment. I think the reason why disappointment hits so heavily is because there's so many beliefs and hopes and dreams and desires that are attached to whatever it was that did not come into fruition. There's a lot of anticipation. And because I'm a planner, I am someone who plans. I plan strategically strategically. I typically will not enforce a plan that I'm not certain is going to take place. And I do this because I like to avoid disappointment at all costs. But sometimes we get caught off guard, right? We have this vision of how things are going to unfold, of how things are going to go. And when it doesn't take place, then it's disappointing. It can be really disheartening. And for some of the events that like I'm still anticipating or I'm still holding hope for, like even the fact that it hasn't translated the way that I thought it would, or it hasn't translated as quickly as I thought I would, it creates this need to actively keep disappointment at bay. Like I'm actively managing disappointment anytime things don't align with the timeline that I had thought or align with sort of the expectations that I had or the narratives that I built up in my head. But when it is a solid denial, like a definitive no, then disappointment comes and it hits me and I am laid out KO by disappointment. And so I want to talk a little bit about it. I think disappointment is one of those things that needs to be acknowledged. It is not something that you can put to the side. And so for me, disappointment comes with a lot of sadness. I feel really sad because of all the plans that I had in place, because of all the things that I was already visualizing myself doing. And so I need to give myself space to feel sad. And I know that I haven't fully felt sad until I have a big cry, right? So with disappointment will come little tears here and there. It will come with like the blues where I'm feeling, really just bad about myself. But then I need to have that big cry where I'm kind of like sobbing it out. And then there's like anger and frustration and it comes in waves. I keep disappointment in check for roughly 3 days and then it wanes. But for the 3 days after I hear certain news, I am dealing with the throes of disappointment, which involves lots of tears. It involves some frustration. It involves some anger. It involves a lot of resentment to some extent. Like I think that there's some resentment that my plans aren't taking place. It's not necessarily resentment to the people who are exercising their right to go in a direction that they want to go in. It's just resentment that my plans were not what I thought they were going to be, right? And there's contempt and resentment towards myself for that. And so that's the part of my disappointment that I have to manage very carefully because I can be very, very harsh and very critical with myself when I had an expectation, when I was anticipating something or I was hoping for something and it doesn't take place. I typically start to beat up on myself. And so what I've learned, like disappointment is part of life and part of my strategy of coping with disappointment is keeping my self-talk in check and not beating up on myself because I had the audacity to be human and dream and hope and expect things to take place in a certain way, to have those expectations like not take place. I mean, that's part of life. And it's interesting because only when I'm dealing with disappointment do I recognize how much I plan or even avoid planning to avoid putting myself in a situation where the plans that I have in place are not going to unfold because I don't want to deal with the self-talk that I subject myself to when it is the case that I'm dealing with disappointment. Like I'm really, really harsh with myself. And so I've learned like that's not the way to go about it. So I've learned like for every harsh thought that comes up that I have to catch, I replace it with something kind. I remind myself that I'm human. I remind myself that I'm not infallible, that I'm not perfect, that I trip up and that everything is about learning and disappointment is its own big learning in and of itself. As I'm dealing with these emotions, and again, it's like waves. Like anytime I feel like I'm better, like I have my moment where I'm crying, I have my moment where I feel frustrated, where I feel angry, where I feel demotivated and sad. I give myself space to feel those things, but then I try to cheer myself up a little bit. But with disappointment, like there's no cheering up within 3 days. Like for the 3 days, I know for sure that even if I watch something that's like lighthearted, like I'm still profoundly sad and it's not really having much of an impact. But I'm trying to keep myself talk in check so that I remind myself I'm kind to myself. I tell myself, Rochelle, like you're only human, like these things happen. We can't predict the future. And even if you had all your ducks lined up, like I have to give myself a place of understanding like why things didn't really unfold the way that I wanted. There's a lot of inner dialogue, a lot of inner talk, but because I'm dealing with like frustration, anger, sadness, and I'm cycling through these emotions in waves, I like to withdraw. When I'm experiencing a lot of these very heavy emotions where I feel very vulnerable, I feel very shaky, I feel like I want to offload my sadness on other people, I just withdraw to my own little corner and I engage with myself and I give myself space to feel these emotions. I validate these emotions and I check my self-talk. I keep my self-talk in check so that I'm not mean to myself as I cycle through these different emotions. So I give myself space to experience these emotions because like there's no distance between me and the emotions when it comes to disappointment. There's no like me pulling myself and like inspecting the emotion from a distance. absence, which is what I typically can do when I'm feeling any given thing on any given day. But with disappointment, I am these emotions. They're just very strong and they overwhelm me. They can overcome me. And so it takes a lot for me to deal with them. So what I do is I do withdraw. I don't socialize a whole heck of a lot because I don't want to spill that negativity on other people when it is the case that I am dealing with my own negativity. I want to keep it contained, so to speak. But then I also, in that period of time, am staying productive. One thing that disappointment creates in me is a need to be very sedentary. I want to be alone. I want to be still, and I want to have a pity party. So I give myself a day for a pity party, a day to like recalibrate, to collect myself. But even on that day, I give myself a quota. And the way that I deal with disappointment is I give myself a quota of things that I need to do to circumvent the doom. And that's kind of like how I address it, because there's always this doom and gloom about, oh, well, you know, it's never going to take place. It's never going to happen, because I don't believe in absolutes. Like, I know that those are irrational thoughts. Like, I know that they're not mine, and they're just the way that my emotions are trying to validate themselves in a way that's like not entirely helpful. So to circumvent those thoughts, I give myself a quota. So for every never that pops up, I give myself a quota. Well, this is how you're going to address it. This is how many applications you're going to put in the ether. This is how many, people you're going to reach out to. And I make myself deal with the quota through those feelings. So despite the fact that I'm feeling disappointed, that I'm feeling sad, I am managing. So rather than just monitoring all the emotions coming up, I am managing those emotions. I am not allowing those emotions to pull me down into a spiral. And I'm like, well, this is an emotion, I validate it, but I don't believe in absolutes and that this isn't going to take place because it didn't take place the way that I wanted it to. And how I address that is with action. I put another thing in the ether to rebuild the hope that is lost, right? So I think that that's super important when it comes to disappointment, to not allow yourself to be completely deflated, to completely break as a result of the disappointment. It's just one learning opportunity that you can bounce back from. And that's the fundamental belief that I take on. It's like, this is the learning opportunity. It's not the outcome, unfortunately. Like, I wish it was the outcome, but it's not, but that's okay. But to bounce back, I need a quota. I need to pull myself out of that hole. So I pull myself out as I'm entering the hole. I guess it's this push and pull struggle that happens at the same time, because I realize that disappointment can pull me into a funk that is unnecessary, that takes me way too long to get out of. So I combat the funk by managing my behavior actively when I feel disappointed. And how I manage that is I stay productive and I circumvent and I counteract a lot of the always and nevers that come up when you're feeling disappointed. So this is never going to happen. Actually, it can happen if you put more kegs in the fire. And so that's what you're going to do today, Rochelle. 5 of this, 10 of that, 15 of this. Even if I don't feel like it, I do it because I think that discipline is such an important trait that comes up when I'm feeling disappointed, because when I'm disappointed, I want to throw it all out, with the water, right? Like, I just don't want to do anything. I want to give up hope and kind of flail my arms and put out the white flag. But because that is not me, I will not yield. That is fundamentally not me. Discipline kicks in, but I feel the muscle of discipline the most when I'm disappointed. And that's just because of the weight and the extremity, like the force of the emotions that I'm experiencing at that point in time. And I think that the real point of this video is that when it is the case that you're feeling disappointed, I think structure and regimen is so much more important, along with compassion, empathy, and kindness. Disappointment needs almost an army of emotions and an army of strategies so that you can pull yourself back up and you can keep pushing through the path that you want to go. Like, things don't work out the way we want to. Relationships don't work out the way that we want to, or in the way that we thought they would. I mean, they work out the way that they're supposed to. And because I believe that there's a difference between what I want and what is best for me, and that I don't necessarily know what's best for me, I have to circumvent a lot of the waves of emotions that disappointment brings up that makes me feel otherwise. And I recognize it makes me feel otherwise, but I know fundamentally that that isn't true. But I have to make sure then, because of the dissonance between my feelings and what I know, that I align my behavior with what I know, and with that, bridge the gap between what I feel, because my feelings will then recalibrate and they will realign to how I typically am, which is joyful, happy, hopeful, ready for the next best thing. We brush ourselves off, we dust it off, we move forward. But disappointment is a tough one. It's definitely an emotion that makes me recognize to what extent I am fragile still, that I am still human. And it gives me also an opportunity to empathize with my humanity, because a lot of the times I'm so driven that I don't really empathize with the emotional toll that a lot of the things that I'm doing or not doing can have on me. But when I'm disappointed, there's no way of avoiding it. I just have to address it. And it's a full-time job, but it's worth it, because I'm supporting supporting myself, I'm comforting myself, I'm challenging myself, I'm pushing myself actively. All of the muscles of discipline are working when I'm disappointed. All of what I've learned by way of, emotional intelligence, monitoring your behavior, so monitoring your emotions and then managing the way that they're manifesting in your behavior. All of that are muscles that I'm flexing actively when I'm feeling disappointed. And so I wanted to come on here and I wanted to talk to you about that because I think a lot of us will just kind of allow disappointment to kind of beat us up. Like I kind of go with the ebb and flow of disappointment. But for me, I've been able to kind of really contain disappointment into 3 days by being very, very vulnerable in those 3 days, giving myself the validation that I need for those emotions, but also like counteracting those emotions with quotas, with actions, with structure, with regiment. Because as much as I feel that things are not going to get better or progress the way that I want, I know that that's just not true. And it's about pushing through those negative feelings and pushing through that toll or that weight of emotion that's as a result of the disappointment that gives me the opportunity to bounce back and get realigned to the objectives that I have in place. And so when you're pushing for stretch goals, when you want to do something big, you're going to experience disappointment. And disappointment can be debilitating. Where your enemies don't debilitate you, where, the naysayers don't debilitate you, disappointment can be the thing that really takes you off stride. And so for me, I've had to be super, super, super conscientious, deliberate, and focused, especially focused when I'm dealing with my own disappointment because of how strong it is, because of how heavy it is, and not lash out in anger and not behave in ways that don't serve me. And so hopefully me expressing this and sharing this with you gives you an opportunity to think about how you behave and how you engage when you're disappointed, when your hopes don't align with reality, and how that's no one's fault, right? And I think that that's really important because no one promised you that the thing that you put in your head that was going to take place was going to take place that way. Like that's the promise you made to yourself based on partial information, based on little information bits that you've built a story out of, that you've built a hypothesis out of. And maybe that hypothesis had a high probability of success, but there's always a probability of failure. And so it's important that we don't beat other people up for the disappointment that we experience, and that we don't project anger and contempt and resentment and bitterness towards other people or even to ourselves because of our disappointment, because it's just a belief that was formed without all the right ingredients, right? It was kind of like a blind belief, a bias, a heuristic that we formed because that's what our brains do that ended up proving to be false. And it's a very debilitating experience when you form a belief and it proves itself to be false. And disappointment is one of those visceral opportunities to recognize like to what extent having our beliefs challenged really does impact our system. In any case, that is the topic for today. Hopefully helpful and insightful to you. Now, before letting you go, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we will be going live at least twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future on our Facebook page. So definitely be sure to tune in. Now, these events are paid events. So if you do see yourself participating in our community on an ongoing basis, then I do suggest that you take a look at one of our package plans. Yes, we do offer package plans over and above our live events, as well as access to webinars and workshops that largely focus on self-mastery over and above those events. So check it out. Be part of our game changer community, being part of the change that you want to see, allowing us a small role to play in your journey. We are on the road to 1K, so we do invite you to follow us across all of our social media platforms, and we look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.
Some days I just feel like the world's into me.